right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on a Thursday. Today we are joined by the Copper River Watershed Project team, and they're going to be discussing the updates to the Eyak Weir replacement project. I'll pass it over to Kate and Chris.
Great. All right. Yes. Thanks everyone for being here. And I'm joined this evening. Our goal is to just have a project update and overview, but we have a lot of our team for implementation here. So we have our design engineer, Ewan from Dow, and we also have some representatives from our construction team, Granite here, Marty and Jake. So really want to make sure that we also have time for asking important questions that the community might want to know from folks who are heavily involved in this project. So like I said, this is, I think, the third community presentation that we've had here. So it's episode 3 of Eyak Lake Weir. The final season finale is hopefully coming in winter 2027. But I don't think everybody has been at every episode, so I am going to do just a brief background overview of the project. We'll give you some relevant updates and then have time for taking the conversation where you're interested. So I'd just like to start with the history of Eyak Lake. This is a picture from the Forest Service from 1950. So this is before the Weir existed. This is the Copper River Railroad was created, that bridge that is still in place, and then the earthquake of '64 happened. And so that's why we have this sheet pile structure at the end of at the outlet of the lake. Because the area was uplifted 6 feet, the lake started draining. And so there was a city managers meeting, and everyone in attendance was in support of installing sheet pile to stop the lake from draining. And that was overseen 9 months later. So in less than a year, a weir was installed. This becomes important when you hear the amount of work that has gone into the new fix. And it was overseen by a state agency that no longer exists. It was reorganized, and so ownership has been uncertain since the 70s, since that reorganization happened, and it's been difficult to do any maintenance without knowing who to ask for permission. And so we at the Watershed Project have worked with a large number of partners, who I'll give a shout out here in a second, to be able to try to be proactive in doing something to address this failing infrastructure. And a lot of this was driven with funding made to improve fish passage and the habitat connectivity between the lake and the river. So this might not be I might have reorganized some things here, so bear with me. I should have checked ahead of time. Okay, well, let me just see if it's next. No, okay. So I'm going to say the partnership that was involved with all of this. So preliminary investigations started with support from the Forest Service and Department of Transportation, that we were able to leverage funding to start getting a concept. And then with that concept, we were able to really get funding from the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council. And then we use that to leverage funding from the Federal Highways Administration, and then have had background support from Fish and Wildlife Service the whole way through. So that's a lot of grants to manage, a lot of relationships to manage. So it's been a large part of what the Watershed Project has done, is working with all of those partners. Like I mentioned, the ownership issue has been challenging, and so we really applaud and appreciate the support of the city of Cordova. And so they've worked with us to figure out that challenge, and I'll give an update on that. And then the Eyak Corporation, in addition to the Forest Service, is a landowner in this area. And they have been very instrumental in helping to steward some of the funding that were eligible for tribal organizations. So it's really a community effort that makes it happen. I'm just the willing mouthpiece here to share that update, and have been helping to facilitate all of these partners over time. I also just want to talk about the importance of the lake and why we want to maintain a lake. It's a place that we love to recreate, that we're familiar with driving by in the wintertime, maybe for ice skating. But it's also home to over 10 species of fish. Many of these salmon species that are really important to the local economy. And Fish and Game can evaluate stocks from Eyak Lake and extrapolate the ex-vessel value in the commercial fishing industry, and it's estimated to be 1.7 to 2.9 million. So this is really Cordova's multi-million-dollar lake, and it also supports the largest catch of coho fishing statistics that are reported to the fishing game. So what's wrong is the infrastructure is starting to fail. The Weir, we have a bulge that is slowly pouring water out and lowering lake levels, not drastically, but over time. And the original Weir was installed to help keep the lake levels largely for the sockeye salmon that spawn along the edge of the lake. So that's still a priority, is to maintain the lake levels for sockeye spawning habitat to stay underwater. And also because the property values and property lines are based on a current lake level, and having a mud flat there would cause some complications if the lake were to drain. So it's a physical barrier, like a dam right now for juvenile and adult fish. And so it's limiting the productivity of this whole system by not allowing more free movement between both the lake and the river. And then Eyak crosses the delta, or exits the delta, and is connected to a lot of other wetland habitat. So being able to support fish moving through all those habitat at different life stages is helps with the productivity of the fishery. And Eyak Lake is also a backup drinking water source for the city of Cordova, and infrastructure relies on certain lake levels to be able to extract the water. This is not, it's most critical in the summer months when there's a high demand on water with our fishing processing industry in full function. So that's another benefit of working or improving the outlet. And so the goals of the design and the project are driven by maintaining those lake levels, ensuring fish passage. It is to continue to support the way the community uses it, but this is not a project with intentions of improving access for sport fishing. It's made it safer because some of that current sheet pile infrastructure is dangerous for sport fishermen who are walking around there. And there are boaters, there's people who take their boats over the current infrastructure, and the new design will have a channel that at depths a day will allow boats to pass over it. It won't improve it and allow boats to go over it all the time necessarily, but we're not taking away the ability of a boat to pass through. And then I mentioned the drinking water. So it's been challenging. I mentioned the ownership challenges. We've got diverse goals, both maintaining lake levels and moving fish up and down river. And with the ownership piece, trying to get an owner, people don't want to own something that's going to be high maintenance. We all know, residents of Cordova, that the city is already having challenges meeting budget demands. And so this is intended to put the investment up front. The investment has gone into making a structure that is low to no maintenance. So that once it's installed, it's not going to have a high cost to be able to exist. We're also literally between a rock and a hard place. So there's rock cliffs on one side, a highway, an aging railroad bridge, highway bridge that is also up for construction. Depending on when the state gets the funding, I think it is moving into the design process now. And then there's utilities that pass through here, and then there's like keeping a giant lake in place while trying to remove and replace the structure that's keeping the lake in place. So I invite you to ask random questions on how that might look. But again, being proactive, if there were to be a failure, it's likely it would have to be a quick fix to try to get in there to stop. And so by being proactive before there's a failure, we hope that we can control the transition from the old structure to the new structure. So I'm going to turn it over to Ewan, who's going to talk a little bit more about the design, and then I'll get back to the timeline. And we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, I'm Ewan. I'm the design engineer at Watershed Project. Well. And what I want to do tonight is walk you through who we started from and can understand why we did so much data collection and acting as a kind of foundation of design, walk through some of the design process, and then show you the result. So this all started back in 2021, as Kate mentioned, with the DOT and some other partners providing funding for an initial site assessment and to figure out what we wanted to do. But our main field data collection really started in 2023, and that included being very intentional about the water levels and recording those and the lake and the river and the boat notch and that, the boat ramp, and that's being collected every 15 minutes since the spring of 2023. So we've got collected data over a wide range of water conditions. And the other things we've collected are some surveys, some flow, so we know what the amount of water is going out of the lake and the velocity associated with that, as well as some ice conditions during winter. The other thing we did was scrape the archives for anything we could find about the Weir. One of the most valuable things that we found, courtesy of the Forest Service, was a 1970 engineering report that identified the pre-1964 earthquake levels in the Weir. So that was very useful for us, looking back and seeing how the Weir performs and making sure that we are being consistent with the kind of hydrology and the lake levels there. We also had 1972 Weir plans and data from the National Weather Service, as well as some federal and state agency reports, and we collated all that data to make sure that we really knew what was going on. One of the most important things that I found was coordinating with everyone either in this room or within the local community, because as you can probably tell, I'm from out of town. So I think that context to make sure that we knew what we were designing was be useful and be appropriate, because I can look at data all day long. It doesn't really mean much until I have your input. So I really appreciated that. And the reason why we spent a lot of time in this phase was to allow us to analyse and assess the river and this meant to be the lake's behaviour, so we have a very solid baseline to go through. So going through the design journey, we wanted to have a really kind of data-driven, standards-based design to make sure that you guys were confident in what we were proposing. It's not just in my head and I didn't scratch some lines on paper. So we created some hydraulic models of the existing conditions and imposed our proposed design to kind of understand how water flowed through the system and how that affected lake levels, both in the upstream and downstream of the river. We used the most recent design standards for fish passage in ADF&G, from ADF&G, as well as the kind of standard state and federal engineering guidance. The fun part for me was the iterative design, where we collected a lot of the feedback from you guys, state agencies, and crew to kind of really work out what this design should be to meet the objectives, as well as meeting our design standards. So there's a lot of back and forth with the designs, and we changed things. We went through several types of Weir design layouts, as well as kind of making sure that we understood that what we were putting forward really met their needs. And the last thing I'd want to point out here is that we incorporated safety factors and some conservative assumptions just to make sure that what we're putting in will last. In my view, this is a once in a generation project. When you put it in, it's meant to stay, and it's meant to fulfill that those design objectives for the life of this project. We only got one shot, so we wanted to make sure that we were being conservative and making sure things stayed in place. So the other thing I wanted to point out here was our peer review methods. So it wasn't just kept in state. We reached out to our dam experts in Montana and gave them the whole package, and they went through it with a fine tooth comb to make sure that everything had their I's dotted and T's crossed, as well as going through some of our local experts here with different federal state agencies, as well as open time. So the one thing I wanted to show you here is an image of what we think it may look like. The one thing the images I've presented before in the last couple of episodes of this were a lot of line drawings, which to me looks amazing. What does it translate well to people who don't really look at engineering drawings? Not so much. So one thing that Kate requested we do was come up with a graphic based on what we think it will look like, and this is the result. That's kind of a safer, more reliable, long-term Weir for Cordova that is also minimally visibly intrusive. This is the final result. I'm very happy to walk through how this works later on, some questions, but Yeah, I'm quite happy to hand this back over to.
So I'll do the non-engineer explanation and then we can ask more details. So what you're not seeing underneath all of this are two pieces of sheet pile that are filled with concrete and then buried in a heck of a lot of rock. And so this rock is very meticulously laid out, very specifically sized. The crest has a low point, a lower point, so that that lower flows. When we see the current weir a lot like a dam, it'll concentrate the flow into a channel. And this channel is designed with extra habitat rocks so that it's never a rushing waterfall. There's always a place for fish to rest and recover as they're moving through. And then actually capture the gradient. So this rocky ramp will be at a gradient that ties in, doesn't quite reach the bridge, so it's good. It's not going to get hopefully will not interfere with the construction when the actual highway bridge is replaced.
Spot on.
Okay. So that's a non-technical explanation. If you have more questions later, we can come back and you can hear the engineers answer. So we talked a lot. Ewan explained over the time period from 2020 to 2024. There was raising money, there was convening experts, there was hiring engineers to help collect and work with our team. Who I'll mention, we've got Kirsty Jerica, who's been on the project from the beginning and has been helping with a lot of the hydrology analysis and data collection, and will help with on-site implementation. And then we also are excited to be joined more recently by Darcy Saget, who is helping herd a lot of cats to keep this project moving forward and in compliance, and brings habitat restoration and fisheries biology experience to the team as well. So we have, I'm not sure if Amy's in the Zoom room, but our partnership coordinator, Amy, is based out of Palmer, and she's also been helping with our contractual pieces and a lot of cat herding to keep the project moving forward, and reporting and grant writing to get more money because the project just keeps getting a little bit longer. And so that's what this slide is about. So at the end of 2024, we had our final designs. We went to bid. We had 3 bids submitted in January of 2025. We were excited by our possibilities to take steps forward, but before we could even do that, executive orders came out of the White House that froze federal funds. And that resulted in not having half of our construction funds available. And unfortunately, I'd love to say that our nonprofit has a very robust account to keep us afloat indefinitely, but that is not the case. So we could not go into contract without the security of those funds. So we're grateful that Granite, our top bidder, was willing to work with us, and we entered into a negotiation and figured out a strategy, because you also might recall that there have been some tariffs that have influenced prices for things like steel, and sheet pile is made from steel, and we need a significant amount of steel for this project. So we were able to lock in the original steel price, and then by July, the federal highways funds became available again. So by August, we were able to go into contract with Granite to move the project forward. But we're also working between a rock and a hard place, and some of the permits that are required, we needed our contractor on board to be able to determine how are we going to hold this lake in place. And so we don't want to rush that process. And so this is not where we make up for lost time. And so this is why we're likely going to be pushing our construction till 2027, because there's a lot of permits that guide this project. And another one is from Fish and Game to make sure that the actual implementation has the least impact on those 10 fish species that we talked about that have very diverse life cycles. There's trout and whitefish in addition to the salmon. And so our window to do the construction, or for Granite to do the construction, is January through April. So January is right around the corner. If you haven't felt it, I have. So yeah, so we're still moving through as if like we can get somewhere, but we don't anticipate that we're going to get the permits in time. So just being honest with the community on that. So we are still meeting regularly with Granite to figure out, the best approach for getting to the dewatering plan that we can take to the permitting agencies, as well as continuing with some of the other permitting pieces. We are gonna, I think, see some sheet pile in town soon. So you'll actually see that we are taking steps forward. So that's something to celebrate. We got sheet pile in 2025. And then last night we were just meeting with the city council, because we have to finalize the ownership piece. So the last episode 2 of Eyak Lake updates was about the ownership challenge we were facing. And after that presentation, we went to city council and we met with, Department of Transportation, the heads of right of way, Commissioner of Department of Natural Resources, trying to figure out, the ownership. If nobody owns it, how do you own something afterwards? It doesn't have a title or anything to transfer. And so the city is going to take over the ownership of it, and we're still finalizing that process. The Watershed Project is helping to finalize a permit because it'll permanently be in DOT's right of way, so you need permission from the state to do that. And then Eyak is navigable waters, and so that's owned by DNR. But they don't own Weirs, they just own the land that the Weir sits on. We tried that. It's on their land, it's yours. It didn't work. But they are going to grant either a permanent easement or some other agreement like you might have between a local municipality and the state for a boat ramp. So we're still exploring those options, but are excited to have that hot potato settled. And it means in the future, it's not a guarantee. I mean, we are hoping that in the future that there's not a lot of maintenance needed, but if there is an issue that needs to be addressed, it doesn't mean that it comes straight from the city coffers. It means we have the local power to grant permission to do work on it, and then organizations like the Watershed Project would work with our partners to problem solve. So we will continue. There's going to be a lot of rock being produced. Our local Wilson Construction, that's a subcontract, so it's helping support the local economy this winter when lots and lots of rocks are being made. And we'll work through next year to make sure we have all the permits in hand so that when it is in our fish window, granite can get going in the waterworks. So we'll keep you posted. If things change again, we'll have an episode 4, but hopefully it's closer to the season finale, which would be spring of 2027, when we'll all see less equipment and more natural transition from Eyak Lake to Eyak River. So this is just another snapshot of what we see today. And then just remember that we're gonna keep our eyes on the prize of what lies ahead with perseverance and the amazing partners and support that we have. Our organization is on Main Street, so you're welcome to stop by if you have more questions, but certainly invite some conversation tonight. But before I open it up, I just want to put a little plug in. This holiday season, we've got Giving Tuesday around the corner, and efforts like this don't just they don't write grants for that. And so it comes from, we have a membership support, and so just appreciate you thinking of your local nonprofits this holiday season. The Science Center is another great example to provide this space and this resource for us to be able to gather and share. And this classroom is often filled with kids. So I'm not one to get involved a lot on social media, but I just want to put an advocate little note out there in support of our nonprofits here, because sometimes it's not fully appreciated. I think all that we can bring and add to the community through bringing these dollars back to support things that are important for Cordova. So I don't know if Marty and Jake, you wanted to say anything, or we just open it up for questions. Yeah, Dana.
I had 2 quick questions. I didn't realize that currently the way the Weir is, that their fish passage was getting inhibited. Is that a high water or a low water thing? And how is this going to improve that?
So it is a high water and it is a low water thing. And so like in this instance, like the juvenile fish are like 60 millimeters. they can't swim up a velocity and a drop like that wave that's coming over the top of the structure. There are areas where the water kind of comes around it, but I've actually taken kids on field trip and found dead fry in there. So it's not, and then that's why mergansers like to hang out there, because there's kind of a blocking point there. And then at the high water, there's just like a large hydraulic waves or hydraulic force that's coming over the top of it that would make it challenging to pass. So I'm sure it's not like a complete barrier, but there's a lot of times where it would be considered a complete barrier.
And so the improvement with the new weir will be a better,
Yeah, so there isn't going to be like a drop. So when the water goes low, instead of exposing sheet pile, it's going to concentrate in the low channel. So there's always so at high waters, it can overflow and widen, and then at lower waters, it concentrates it. So it's in a channel and it's not either a sheet pile or submerged under a big wave.
and then one more quick question. If we had another earthquake where we had uplift, how would you anticipate this weir dealing with that?
That's a good question. The earthquake is seismically designed for the maximum credible earthquake. So our geotechnical engineers would theorize, like, for this given area, what's pretty much what's the worst case scenario, and that's what they use when looking at how it needs to be in the surrounding soils. So that's what we factored into the design. So hopefully the weir will stay in place given what we know.
Following up on that question, it could be the next earthquake gives you a down, if the bottom falls out, then how is that going to survive? That's the situation.
In that case, I would imagine that it's a kind of a global shift down. So
Yeah.
relatively, the weir would likely stay in place. I'll just kind of put the asterisk out there that I'm not a geotechnical engineer, but it's something that is somewhat that has been kind of thought through during the design.
What happened to the existing structure in an earthquake?
That would be River, I think.
Doesn't matter if it goes up or down.
Yeah. It's not gonna get better. Yeah.
What considerations have been taken for the DOT bridge in its current state and its future, hopefully better state?
I can dive straight into that.
Sure.
So what we did was look at our models for that. So in our existing models, we took a look at where the piers are and the velocities and the shear stress that go around the piers just now. And then during our design, creating our new structure, we wanted to make sure that those current velocities and shear stresses don't increase. So we're matching like for like. I've got some velocity plots here with my H&H report to show you, but essentially what we wanted to do was match existing.
What about during the diversion?
That's something that's being worked out just now, yeah. So as part of the specs, we required that a third-party engineer design the diversion plan just to make sure that everything's kind of designed to a T and it doesn't have kind of any oversight from either us or the contractor to make sure that it's an independent design. So that'll be what
Is that the dam or the weir that's gonna go in, it's gonna be 2 levels of sheetrock and then concrete or rock in between? So that's gonna be stable and walkable for somebody? I mean, if the current isn't gonna carry them away or anything and they have the right boots on and such, they'd be able to walk across on that?
Yeah, the best way to look at this would be as if we're recreating a river channel downstream of the weir. Upstream of the weir, it'll be slightly steeper rock, more kind of closer to a 3-to-1 surface. And the best kind of analogy I have for that is like the rock that's just outside the centre here. So that will be kind of fairly steep going up to the weir, but then after the weir, kind of a river slope of 3%, so kind of a fairly gentle.
What's the depth of the channel at lake extreme lows and extreme highs?
The depth of the channel, just now or in the proposed?
The new one.
The new one. So, for with the majority of the time, it'll probably be kind of close to a foot or just above the foot for your average flow. During kind of extremes, what we found was that the Eyak River was the constriction for the system, so that caused the lake to kind of back up. So the river and the lake are it will be the same elevation at that point. So that can be quite deep depending on the event that is occurring. But for kind of low flows, maybe kind of half a foot thereabouts. So I can show you some kind of graphs of what we think might occur, but it shouldn't be too much different from what you're seeing now in Eyak River.
We don't expect it to ever run completely dry.
No, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to connect with notches in the smaller channels, that we wanted to always have some form of flow going over it. So that's that kind of squiggly channel in there is kind of a half-foot deep channel that will funnel water over the Weir during low flows.
Is the placement of that, I guess, rock wall closest to the lake, is that kind of about where the weir is currently, or is that gonna deviate from the current position of the structure?
It'll be further lakeside, and the weir now is a straight line across, and it's gonna be like that.
Like,
So the Weir will tie in at the same points. So this is the kind of path that's coming inside. Just now it kind of cuts across to about here and then has another kind of small angle. But yet the Weir will increase in length. And the reason that we needed to increase the length was that because we were adding a lot of a lot more fill in here and a lot of rocks, it increases the roughness of the stream. Therefore, we needed to kind of compensate for that and the amount of water going out, because the basis of design here is to make sure that we're matching the existing flows that are exiting the lake. So the one thing that we had to do to kind of make sure that we were kind of throttling that correctly was increase. So that's why it's kind of deviated from the existing and pushed back.
I just want to thank you, Kate, and the watershed for your persistence on this project and with great project. But do you have any idea of the species that are there now, which ones are suffering the most from that existing weir? I'm especially thinking of whitefish. This guy's going to go and have big whitefish runs. I think I've seen one in 27 years.
Yeah, Kirsty.
That's my theory, is that the weir probably wiped out the whitefish.
Yes.
Whitefish like to spawn in, the river, and so they probably backed out, tried to spawn in the river, and then they're not jumpers. They're bottom. And so, yeah, they probably weren't able to get back to the lake. It's kind of been my anecdotal theory.
How long after the earthquake was the original weir installed?
64 earthquake, and it was installed September 72, so 8 years.
What kind of things did we learn about the lake during that 6 years? How bad is it hurt by the earthquake?
I wasn't born. I don't know from the history. Maybe you can.
We tried to understand that as well, but there was just no documentation that we could really rely on to describe those type of conditions. The closest thing we could find was that engineering report from 1972, which they gave some recommendations for what the state could do, but this was the existing year was probably improper.
No question for our contractor. Come on, they came all the way here.
You guys get confident in it?
No, we would use our own series of sheet piling to build up the falls one further lakeside, and you can construct the the permanent one and then put all the concrete, sort of like a concrete bull nose along it to get sort of a whaler or string. So yeah, it'd be a diversion, kind of a phase 1, phase 2 type thing. Yeah, 2 houses.
And then you pull all that out.
Yeah, we pull. Give it the phase. End up using the permanent one or the other one type of thing. So we'll take our sheet pile back. Yeah.
Oh, you will, oh, no, I was gonna say she could sell it.
I don't know, there, she's
I think there's 35 feet and then, so they're varying, but I think they're 35 feet overall length. So 20-ish feet, 20-ish to 25 feet down there.
Is there any cathodic protection on the permanent one to help the sheet pile last longer?
That's an engineer question.
Not for this, and the reason that we didn't put cathodic protection on kind of this galvanized sheet pile here is that we ended up going with a thicker sheet pile, and one of the things that works in our favour because it's completely submerged, it's not nowhere. There's no kind of free oxygen to kind of degrade it as quickly as it would be otherwise. So that's why we felt fairly confident with going with a thicker section that would work just as well.
So during low water, foot traffic like along the edges of the channel there isn't going to cause any damage at all.
It's not anticipated. It's like you'll see here, it'll be kind of fairly kind of rocky material. It wouldn't be boulders, but it would be kind of gravels. So it'd be just like the side of the Eyak, kind of close to the boat launch down there. So yeah, kind of cobbles and gravel and things like that.
I know you guys all have your traffic control plan, but like as far as like anticipated like road closures, or is it just gonna be equipment moving through that there might be delays?
There might be, maybe when we're running sheet pile across the road or something like that, there'd be some flagging, but we don't really.
There's a parking area, right?
Yeah, we're gonna use that as a staging area
That makes sense.
and then build like a little temporary road out there from that spot. There might be some traffic control, we do that, but we don't have any plans to really occupy too much of the highways with any kind of permanent basis, or even like a full lane closure or anything like that.
And so how many people will be, it'll just be the two of you, or you have?
He's an expensive employee.
Power on this really isn't all that high. It's, you have a crane there for the sheet piling, an excavator for a lot of their work and some trucks. Maybe some labor and some welders and stuff like that, but at any given stage, my guess is somewhere between 6 and 10 people total. It's just not it's just a very methodical type of work rather than just go everything. You gotta work one half and then the other.
So the ferry's gonna run in January to bring their equipment over?
I mean, no spoiler, but there's talk from Representative Stutes, it might come in a little earlier for Christmas, we might get the fair, I don't know, but.
As long as the sheet pile's not on that AML barge.
In Oregon? Is it Oregon?
They'll-
Oh, no, sinking or.
What are they saying?
I mean, the one that's supposed to be here?
We lost another.
Hopefully not.
That's a question for Granite. They're transporting my sheep pile right now. We think it's on its way.
Yeah. I was
Jake, you look concerned right now.
I drove down to AML yard and Steve was there. Was it supposed to be in a bar?
Downstairs.
We needed a tracker on it, so we can watch it come up here.
Well, we got till next year, so.
Yeah. Oh dear.
They charged me when the phone in Bethel that was still sitting in Seward, so I'm like, oh.
What we
Well, I won't force you to stick around, but just wanted to provide a space to share the updates and this next episode of Eyak Lake Weir updates, and hopefully again that the next one's the grand finale. But we'll keep you posted, and if you don't already receive updates, there's a sign up in the back that the Science Center has for keeping you posted on these programs, and I'll get a copy, I think, of the list here so you can make sure that you're in the loop of what's happening. And there's some of our organization newsletters if you want to learn more. We do actually do other things besides Eyak Lake Weir. And if you do grab one of these handouts, I didn't have a chance to update the what's at stake right now. This was something that went to, I was lobbying the state legislator this year to try to get help getting our funding or get the funding that we didn't have when federal highways was frozen. So that's old news. That problem has been taken care of, and now we're just climbing up the next one. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody.